Okay, I'm told I can start now with this presentation, which is a presentation I was asked to give to sort of summarize the Italian experience in the past 10 years on migrant identification. Of course, I need to give you a little bit about the background. A lot has been said today, and I apologize for my messy PowerPoint because I've been trying to adjust it so that I can say maybe something slightly interesting, because obviously we have all identified the same issues. Now, the perspective I am going to talk to you from is a perspective of 10 years of collaboration of my lab. I am from the University of Milan. I'm a professor of forensic pathology, and I lead a lab which is called Labanov, which is a fairly small lab within the Institute of Legal Medicine of my university. And in 1995, it was founded for the purpose of doing research, performing research in the identification of unidentified dissidents. So we have been campaigning and doing research in Italy for 30 years. In 2007, to make a long story short, this campaigning led to the creation of an Italian government office for missing persons and unidentified bodies, with which we linked very closely. And in 2014 and 2016, this office decided, together with us as a technical scientific consultant, to deal with migration. So to consider unidentified migrants as unidentified Italians, because the Italian office was destined for domestic purposes. Through MOUs, we had 6 or 7 years of very good work together on the Italian territory. We started with the 2 largest disasters in Italy, which are the October 3rd disasters with almost 400 victims, and the April 18th, 2015 disaster with 2,015 victims. And at this point, Italy had an office that was dedicated to the identification of missing migrants. After that, we now know politics change and things change slightly. The MOUs are still going. The momentum is slowing down. But I want just to tell you that in these 10 years, we have seen what isn't working, or for the Italian scenario, which sometimes is in agreement with others have said today, sometimes not. But this is just a few pointers we would like to share with you. Now, basically, this slide is a resume of what has been done in these 10 years. So, we have all been talking about collecting the data of the bodies and collecting the antemortem data. Of course, we tried with this office government to create a pool of all the different disasters, because it's good and it's almost instinctive when you have 400, 1,000 dead to activate DVI, and DVI was activated for the larger disasters in Italy. But what happens to the other disasters? We should see this migrant disaster scenario as a series of many disasters diluted in time and place. So victims are arriving in different places, and there are 2 today, 100 tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 5. So we decided to try and pool 71 events. These are the events we have been working on. And of course, collecting the post-mortem information with the Ministry of Justice, so autopsy reports, the scientific police, the Carabinieri, and other 13 universities that are part of the project. Then we decided to say, well, how can we collect the antemortem information? We've all been saying that it's very difficult to get in touch with the relatives, of course, through the embassies, so the Ministry of External Affairs in Italy, the Foreign Office, but also ONGs, fundamental for reaching families in the countries of origin. Comitato 3 Ottobre, Tarek spoke about this yesterday, the ICRC and the Italian Red Cross, still ongoing, and occasionally also IOM. So, basically, we have, for the large disasters, a very high rate of identification. For the Lampedusa one, we have 82% identified, and identifications are still going. The huge issue is those that were not treated as disasters, which is the majority. And for this, we are working with 2,000 PM files and 350 AM files, so there's a big disproportion. But only 25% of the victims have been identified in these normal cases. And this is the big problem, of course. The work is ongoing. Another 2 issues I wanted to share with you, which we've only just touched on, is that 30% of these have matches But because they don't reach the threshold for DNA identification, they cannot be identified. And this leads us to another technical scientific issue I would like to address at the end of this very short talk, because I don't have a lot of time, but I also have a train to catch. And also, we have been verifying those that have been identified as soon as the bodies were taken through photography, personal belongings, etc. And we are, it's a photocopy of what the literature says, 20% error. So we have also detected misidentifications. Now, we've all said it. Morris Tidball said, I liked his phrase very much, so I fixed the slides with his phrase, obligation of results not only means this is what we're aiming for, but even if there were all the political will in the world to identify migrants as we identify domestic Italians or the French or whatever, we still have many issues that need to be tackled from a more technical point of view. And I think at least in 46 member states, something can be done. At least I'm seeing the glass half full. Now, they all concentrate on the dealing of postmortem data, the collecting of postmortem data and antemortem data. So the take-home messages, many of this has been said, autopsies need to be performed, and I should stress full autopsies. We cannot rely on photographs. As I said, we cannot rely on personal items. These lead us to make big mistakes. It's expensive, it's more expensive, but we need to do full autopsies. And many times we are preparing for exhumations of some of the cases we've dealt with because the DNA sample was taken, but a full autopsy with dental data was not taken. And now we have antemortem dental data from Eritrea. So this is a big issue. Another thing is capacity building and training. From the Minnesota Protocol, it's all there, how it should be done, but many centers are still not using these protocols, and this is something that needs to be fixed. And of course, we all said that it's important to pool data, share data, because of course, as we said, Southern European countries need to share data because, for example, in one of our disasters, and I'd like to say that it was the big disaster of April 18th, where the Italian government at that time pulled up, was the only government that ever pulled up a wreck from 400 meters beneath the sea with 1,000 victims to identify those victims. So this is something I always like to remember. So sharing of data, I think that the talk that Sarah Hitchin gave from Interpol is very explanatory, and I think the solution, or a lot of the solution, is there. Collecting antemortem data. Just two things I want to stress, because here also a lot has been said. We need institutional reference points for family members. Usually NGOs help us a lot on this. Of course, as has been said, we need safe data exchange policies, but it is not, and I would like to dwell on what has been said a couple of yesterday by Florian, saying, yes, we need to collect data from the families, but the families are abroad, and databases need to be done with that data, need to be filled with that data. But of course, we have found out that in our experience with our antemortem with families we have met, directly or indirectly, 50% of the AM files have been compiled, filled in, from families which are in Europe. So this means that in our statistics, Europe can sort of help, not solve, or help find the solution to half of these unidentified bodies. So Europe is a big player in this, and of course, we also need to get in touch with the countries of origin. Another thing that was mentioned was costs. In the documentary, and someone mentioned expensive, very expensive. I don't think this is true. And again, in our experience, we are working with the police forces and with the Carabinieri, who are doing pro bono work. It's not institutional. They're doing it in their time. But in their experience, they have said that it would need, in my opinion, only 20 to 30% more investment of what they usually get yearly to deal also with migrations. And this probably is true also for autopsies and forensic pathology work. So I think this is a very important point, because as we said, Interpol may be the solution, and I think that if we have those who already do this job day in, day out with domestic cases enforced to do migrant cases also, this would be a huge gain. And of course, the DVI approach that the Greeks talked about is very important, but of course it has to be for every single wreck, every single incident. The single body, 1,000 bodies, 100 bodies. But that has been said. If we do this as Europe, and I allow myself to say we do this because I feel very much part of this. If we do this, this will be the solution, like Tania Delabard was saying before, to many other issues. We don't know. We identify migrants because they're drowning on a boat, but we don't know if bodies on the shore or in large cities are bodies of migrants who have perhaps been here 10 years, but who cares if they're migrants or marginalized Italians or the French? It's vulnerable people who need to be identified, as she very eloquently said previously. So this would be a solution also to domestic internal issues concerning identification. So we've all said it. Everyone has said it. I think I don't need to repeat what has been said very well before me. We need databases in whichever shape and form we want. We need to collect data and find safe ways of sharing data. And I'm very happy every single person has said this in these past 2 days. So this has been taken in. And it just means deciding where the hubs are. And I think it's important. It's very easy. It's easier to pool the postmortem data, I think. Perhaps less easier to pool the antemortem data because families need to know where to go. The families we meet say, we didn't know someone was trying to identify our dead bodies, and they're also saying, we have given our DNA to several agencies. You know, I'm fed up, and I'm also quite angry about this. So again, it needs to be very clear. I very much like the idea of the toll-free number in Greece to call, and they tell you where to go. But again, institutions need to do this with the assistance as facilitators of NGOs. This is our experience. So at least the 50% that we see that can be solved through Europe makes these 46 member states very, very important. One more minute, and I just wanted to dwell on recovery. Of course, recovery is a luxury. If I don't go mistaken, the Pylos wreckage was not recovered, so God knows how many bodies that are still there, with families who have already given the antemortem information. Italy did recover only one wreck, and I think it's an example that proves how much can be done by this. And I think it's a luxury. It costs a lot of money, but it's something we should not consider, because if it were an airplane or a Costa Concordia full of Italians, we would have already recovered these wrecks. So again, it's something to keep in mind. One final thing, science. DNA is important, fingerprints important, clinical data, odontology, but all the Interpol primary identifiers are wavering a little bit in this scenario. Not all, but some of these, good percentage of these migrants cannot be identified through DNA. They are 14-year-olds, no children. Maybe they have half-brothers. We don't know where the relatives are, and they're very difficult to get in touch with. And perhaps we need to do more research on personal descriptors, on other traits that can be used to identify. But we're all spoiled by DNA and fingerprints, so nobody has done very much research on this. And so I think scientists need to start thinking about this. And also, just for the European Council, the ERC, the European Research Council, doesn't envisage forensic science for funding research. So this is something that we should think about. So finally, concrete policy measures. I think 46 member states can do a lot. And I think in drafting legislation, be it national or EU, for new laws, regulations that will make it more coercive to identify, getting results and not only means. And facilitating working groups. I think this is very important. So I need to leave because my train is in an hour, but I would like this meeting to end with the European working groups on this stemming from these 2 days and from the wonderful work that Julian Palke has done with Marie Martin and Emanuela and all his group. And it has been lovely to see in the past 10 years finally something become more real. So let's hope this can continue. Thank you. Now, this is the museum we have in Milano, so come and visit us whenever you wish. Okay, so I have to go.
I will bring you. So they're here. Let me bring you out. You can proceed.
Okay. After the great speech of Mrs. Cattaneo, we are the last panel, as you know. So, and also me, I need to take a train in 2 hours because I need to travel to Korea. So let me introduce myself. I'm George Stamatis. I came from Greece. I'm a member of the PACE, and I'm here as a member of the Equality and Non-Discrimination Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And I would like to know that before, as a Secretary General of Social Solidarity in Greece, I was responsible for 2 years in the last refugee crisis in Lesbos Island, especially to support accompanying children and to organize the whole humanitarian aid and psychological support to the families that they lost their relatives in this kind of travel from Turkey, especially to Greece, and of course from the other cities. But as a politician, allow me to say something. We're talking about the migrants. We're talking about all these very interesting and important things. But in the end of the day, we have to talk about what happened in our world that changed in the whole situation of the population of the migrants. And no, this is not an issue of the Mediterranean countries. It's not an issue about the Turkey, about the Greece, Italy, Malta, and Spain. It's for whole Europe and the whole world. And of course, after the Arabic Spring, we'll be very happy that something changed in these countries, especially to the Mediterranean Arabic countries. But now we have dictatorship, no democracy, no investments from Europe in these countries. Of course, in the European Union, we have the new law about the migration and asylum, but the result is people travel to find a new, good future for their lives to Europe, the most stable place in the world. And now, here, you, the more specialists from the United Nations, from the Council of Europe, we're talking about what we can do about the migrants. So it is like sometimes that we lose our orientation in what happened in the real world. And in the real world is we don't have democracy, we don't have stable states, and in this time, some of our countries, they cooperate with these countries, with dictatorships, with no measures, to the public issue what happened in this cooperation. And I think that Europe, and especially the members of the Council of Europe, the pillar of human rights in the world, allow me to say, we are more responsible to find solutions, not only about to have resolutions, to have reports, but we have as MPs to convince our governments and our people that migrants is the future. Without migrants, we have demographic problems, not in Europe, in the whole world. And we have to see with clear eyes how we can be part in this world and not to be here to talk about the all things that we mentioned you today and yesterday. So this is my opinion. It's not my government opinion, it's my opinion as MP with Mr. Parke. We've met in Greece when he visited Greece last year, but we have to see the new world, and the new world is with the migrants. Not only the migrants from Africa and from Asia, with the rules, of course, but without them will be a place with elderly people, and we're talking about the long-term care and the other issues, but not about their future. So, based on all this information that you receive over the last 2 days, of course, the question is certainly what can do to the policymakers and for the national authorities, of course. We have some initiatives have been undertaken in some states in Europe, but also in Africa, to facilitate institutional cooperation on this issue. In particular, we have some countries have appointed national focal points on mice and migrants. These are the administration official appointed on the ministry to act as a liaison person across ministries on this issue. These focal points is very important, can also be a liaison person with their correspondents from other countries. This initiative bringing together European and African countries is part of the Rabat process and is coordinated by the IASC and the ICMPD. A number of member states of the Council of Europe have appointed such focal points, and some of them are present today, which are thankful for all. So we have three great panelists. Mrs. Guaianeri from the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she'll present what the German authorities have done so far on this front. Mrs. Salado, who is based in Madrid, is presenting one of the most expert organizations in the field of cross-border cooperation to identify missing persons. And of course, Mr. Diop made us the great honor of traveling all the way from Senegal to present the efforts of the Ministry of African International and Foreign Affairs as a part of this network of focal points on mice and migrants. So we have 8-10 minutes for your speeches. So you can produce, of course, in more details your CV. So to have some time for questions before the closing remarks. So the floor is Mrs. Guaianeri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. The outgoing and the incoming German government supports the Council of Europe in its Parliamentary Assembly as guardians of the fundamental rights, democracy and human rights and the rule of law. So I would like to thank very much to Marie and the whole team of the Council of Europe, to Julian Parke for putting up the conference and also for inviting us. I wanted to just briefly mention our network of national focal points, so I won't take too much time, and I'm very happy to give more time to the real experts here. So following the thematic meeting of family separation and missing persons in the context of migration held in the framework of the Rabat process in September of 2023 in Geneva, one of the key recommendations was to set up a network of national focal points for missing migrants. The member states, of the Rabat process, we set one aim: cooperating on the issue of missing migrants in terms of prevention of disappearances, search and identification, and addressing the needs of affected families. And we know this needs cooperation among authorities in countries of origin, transit, and destination. One important precondition for this transnational cooperation is to know whom to contact in another country. So therefore, one of the primary roles we want to take as a national focal points are to serve as a point of contact for inquiries by authorities in other countries with regard to specific cases. And also, for example, what I'm doing now, represent the authorities in discussions on cooperation or policy questions. As far as I have been informed, currently our network has like 20-ish or 25 national focal points on missing migrants. Approximately 14 of those are from African countries and 8 from European countries. I assume that I can speak on behalf of all the network that we want to express our sincere appreciation to the ICRC, especially Florian von König here, as well as the authorities of the Gambia and Switzerland, who have been doing all the work of setting up this network. We are a very diverse group. So we are from ministries of foreign affairs, ministries from the interior, and also ministries for migration, for example. We also are grateful that the IOM and the UNHCR are part of our network. Although we have already gathered quite a lot amount of states, I do not want to hide my ambition that we would be very happy to grow in the future. So let me therefore invite the representatives of member states to appointing their own focal point. Within the network itself, members have to deal with a lot of different issues, and we exchange views on that. For example, on how dangerous the different routes are, if people really know what they're getting themselves into it or not. And within the network, we listed to a number of best practices carried out by the authorities. For example, we listened to discussions or like inputs from the National Police of Djibouti. Also, Mr. Temelis from the panel this morning was there. Also, we had the pleasure to listen to Mr. Diop here right next to me, talking about search and identifying missing migrants. And we also got in touch with civil society organizations like Euromed Rights, and also listened to Mrs. Salado from the Argentine Forensic Anthropology team. Our next meeting will be in Gambia in July, so we are really happy that we can set up one in-person meeting, and the other were hybrid or like online meetings. My last point would be a concrete project that Germany is working on, as mentioned in the resolution in the Parliamentary Assembly that we are talking about. It is very important to identify, store, and process the cases of the unidentified human remains. The legal basis for this is also important. One approach that we in Germany do is that we are collaborating with the Interpol database in Lyon, known as iFamilia, which we heard about this morning. 72 countries already feed their DNA profiles of unidentified human remains, and 50 also provide data of relatives into a database. We in Germany are committed to go on doing that, but on the same time, we also acknowledge the reality, and we know that some people are afraid of sharing their data with Interpol or with the national police. So we know that it is one option to pursue this database, but we also need to come up with a feasible plan which is working for everyone. So just let me close with my conviction that I took away from those 2 days here. Addressing the tragedy of missing migrants calls for thoughtful and sustained cross-border engagement. We are obviously just at the beginning, where good practices can become common practices. Let us remain committed in this collective effort. We owe it to our fellow people, like Batul and her sister, and to our promise of upholding human rights and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ganieri, just on time. And I think it was very interesting that it introduces the way of your job, but I think it's better after, in our discussion, to tell us the difficulties to cooperation with other focal points, because we have some other view from focal point from Nigeria, for example, to Germany or to Germany or Tunisia, etc., etc. So to close the gap between cooperation on the focal points. And now I give the floor to Ms. Salado, in Spain, Salado, for your speech.
Thank you. We have a short time, so thank you very much to the Council of Europe, Julian, Marie, Manuela. And to be at the end, I think there are many things that were already discussed, that were already shown. And just as a reminder, in the complexity of this migration, we saw how the dynamic, the shifting migratory routes thinking in the search and the identification of missing persons is having an impact. The variation in temporality from weeks to years, and especially the multiplicity of state and non-state actors in 3 different moments during the journey, the arrival and the post-arrival of persons in the move, is a permanent and increasing problem. So I don't have to remind the figures of IOM or different institutions that are showing us that this is not only a permanent problem increasing, but also is moving, is changing all the time. So our mechanism, our network has to be enough strong, but also enough flexible to adapt to this change that is happening all the time. So when we go to the specific problem in the identification, the search and the identification of missing persons in a migratory context, we were reminding that we have missing persons on one side, yeah? And we also have unidentified persons that not necessarily are dead, they are also alive. Sometimes we have to identify living persons, and many times our protocols are not ready for dealing with living persons in the identification, forensic identification. And that the identification is a process, it's not a technique, it's not just applying DNA, just having a database, is a process that starts at the moment that the person is missing, that the person has no contact with the family. And we need to collect simple, comparable information. What means comparable information? Information from the missing person, information from the unidentified person that can be compared. That means standardization. That means that we have to discuss and we have to collect from families and from autopsies or from clinical medicine comparable data to be able to identify someone. So this needs forensic analysis, but this comparison of data will need a lot of actors, state and non-state actors in a dialogue. And this multi-dimensional process is what we need to be a bit successful with the search. So the problem is that this is broken. This line between the missing persons and the unidentified persons is broken. This line is not communicating. And we have many different challenges in the missing persons side, problems in legislation. The non-recognition of missing migrants is something that is really challenging this process. The gap in legal mechanisms to protect migrants, but the limitations or total inability to file complaints of disappearance, yeah? The possibility for a family to go to a place and to make a complaint, for the case to enter to state structures is broken in most countries. And definitely in Europe is broken. So how to organize, that is already organized, relative civil society in these informal networks that have today a risk of abuse, families are abused because of this network also of informal help. The lack of proactive attitude in the investigation of the reports of disappearance, and really there is an enormous available information on missing persons, but is fragmented, dispersed, and is not able to enter in state structures, because the perverse, this is a personal opinion, the perversion in Europe is that structures are designed to be waterproof, to this information to enter into the structures to be compared with the bodies that appear. Is intentional or not, I don't know, but this is happening. Information is begging to enter in state structures. I cannot. So, on the other hand, there is a significant willingness at the local level, at the regional level, in civil society to help. But we see this like the reality. We see missing persons, numbers, dots, unconnected, and they are not like that. People is connected. Organizations are connected. Institutions are connected. We don't need to connect. We need just to re-establish some links that were broken or that in a moment some legislation blocked, and is possible. On the hand of the unidentified persons, of course, we have a disparity of forensic capacities. This is something that we are trying to help with. In Spain, I am very proud because I'm Spanish. I'm very proud that this protocol, specific protocol in the identification of missing migrants, can be the first one in Europe, standardizing the practice of all forensic doctors throughout the forensic areas. Why this is not seen as a privilege, I don't know, but should be. Lack of standardized protocols, limited resources for the investigation and forensic identification, legal challenges specific, and the non-categorization of bodies prevent the follow-up also. We don't have in our databases the category of a person in the context of migration, so it's diluted. It's diluted for follow-up, it's diluted for burial, it's diluted for many things. In this connection of missing persons and unidentified persons, still there is a lack of effective state search mechanisms and strategies. Effective. There is a focus in criminalization and externalization. There are difficulties in the inclusion of information of missing migrants into the judicial system. To make an example, there are 1,000 cases of missing persons collected by the Senegalese Red Cross, transferred to the Spanish Red Cross, transferred to Spain, not able to enter into the judicial system because it's blocked. The information is there, 1,000 cases collected recently. And there are differences across states in the identification criteria required and the overlapping mandates across institutions. Disputes, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Justice is preventing really some common effort in the identification. Key initiatives, DVI efforts, there are many good examples, but we know that DVI, disaster victim identification, applies for a disaster and don't cover the complexity of migration. Many of migrants don't arrive in a group. So we need structures, not only a technique. DVI is just a technique, it's an approach when we have many persons who arrive together. But it's not, even if it's successful, we cannot deal with the complexity. So in our pilot project, during 1 year, in a pilot project covering Senegal, Gambia, Morocco, Spain, Tunisia, and founded by the Swiss federal state, we learned that there are initiatives in the field. In Gambia, the Youth Development Association collecting information and derivating this to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be entered into the state structures. In Morocco, we have Hassan here, AMSV UJDA is making a dialogue between the prosecutor, the administrative bodies, the forensic doctors, identified persons without any resources. Persons disappear in other countries. In Senegal, the Bureau d'Appui, d'Orientation et de Suivi, the BAOS, in the Secretariat of State for Senegalese Abroad, creating the offices finally to be close to the relatives, to give the information. In Spain, the working group of forensic doctors, the willingness always of forensic doctors to do better, and the Spanish Red Cross with the beautiful project Death at the Sea, that nobody is really paying attention to this. In Tunisia, forensic doctors again, but initiatives need to collect state and non-state actors. This is just an example. We don't have much more time, but this is the border project that was developed in Latin America. There is other work abroad, Europe, and in Latin America 15 years ago. Slowly, a mechanism with state and non-state actors, not a parallel mechanism, a mechanism including the information, organizing a network, as Batul say, with participation of civil society, real participation, meaning organization, trusted organizations, linked and formalized in agreements to be able to locate, accompany families, to give the information and the biological reference samples to formal or agreed structures, that can be introduced into the state structures and shared, transnationally. This state and civil society mechanism, more and more countries were joining. There are countries now in Central America, Mexico, and some of the states in the United States that are participating in this. It was not easy, no. But I don't think that Europe is more complicated than Mexico or Guatemala or really, or the Darien is not easy, I can tell you. So at the moment, there are not big numbers, no, but there are formal structures and national structures in dialogue transnationally with other countries. And it's going up, and it's going better, and more countries are joining to these forensic data banks that are accompanying families formally through civil society, including the information in state structures, trying to identify and communicating back to the families, because notification and handover of the bodies and repatriation is also important. This is working today. Conclusions. We have to go. Missing and unidentified migrants are a permanent problem, and numbers are increasing. There are possibilities to tackle this issue and some progress. Existing structures is not my idea, and initiatives have proven to be insufficient. We know that. That's why we are here. Identification process is not a technical problem. We say, all of us, it's a structural problem, and it's a national problem first. We are trying to think in transnational mechanisms when our national structures are poor, are broken. The idea that accessing information on missing migrants in origin countries is impossible is a misconception. It's not true. There is a good excuse, but it's not true. There's already organization of families and civil society collecting information and attempting to reach the state level, and the state level is blocking this. Improvement of the identification process does not require necessarily significant resources. It's a question of coordination, legal mandates, authorization, and communication. And finally, there is a critical role of national focal points on missing migrants, but not only transnationally. In my opinion, they are the hope. I hope that really the focal point can communicate Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that can clean the house inside. And then, if in my house we don't talk each other, how can I communicate with the neighbor? We have to start with the national structures. And focal points are my only hope today to communicate this and to have the power after to liaise with the neighbors, with transnationally, and with civil society. So I think it's possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One of my questions is how the power, the focal points, has the legal power from the states to work on this, and from your speech. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned the gap in legal mechanism to not recognize missing migrants. It's very important. So, and now, Mr. Diop from Senegal.
Oui, oui.
So, Mr. Diop, you have the floor, and a great honor to have you here. Mrs. Diop, Mr. Diop speaks in French?
Non, France, oui.
In French.
Oui.
In French.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le...
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to the chair of this session. I'd like to begin by thanking the Council of Europe for having invited me to come along and address this issue, that's to say missing migrants, and the role being played by Senegal. I'd like to congratulate Manuela, because she is the one that has really supported me throughout this process. So a particular thanks and mention of Manuela. So Senegal then, grappling with the problem of missing and deceased migrants. I'm not going to situate the context because I think basically since yesterday various speakers have situated the context when it comes to missing migrants. So allow me to move on straight away to the challenges that we need to address when talking about missing migrants. I think the issue of missing migrants is a very complex issue, extraordinarily complex one indeed. We're talking about a migratory phenomenon that we have to try and apprehend or understand both at the national and the international levels. I think there's also compartmentalization when it comes to various approaches to migration, and it's difficult to really gauge the impact of this compartmentalization. And we don't have any sort of harmonized approach in terms of strategies whereby the role of each protagonist is defined, guaranteeing the synergy of any action taken at both national and international level. I think if we want to be effective when it comes to tackling the problem of missing migrants, there has to be a political will, a political resolve on the part of all countries involved. I think it's only with political will that we will manage to reduce the issue, the phenomenon of missing migrants, and to deal in exemplary fashion with those who are deceased. So I think we have data, but I think there's an adequate supply of quality data in order to better understand migratory flows, trends that are emerging in terms of those migratory flows. We don't have enough information on the rights of migrants, on migrant smuggling, or the trafficking in human beings. And I think our systems, when it comes to identification of missing migrants or deceased migrants, our systems are very weak indeed. So what is Senegal doing? Well, I think it needs to be said first that Senegal is a country of immigration. It's a country of transit also, but it's a country of emigration. It's all those things at the same time. So what structures exist in Senegal and that are of relevance when talking about missing migrants? Well, there are a certain number of ministries involved. The Ministry for African Integration and Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Health, the Social Action and Solidarity Ministry, just to quote a few. There are also associations within civil society, but associations of parents or relatives of migrants. There are associations of migrants themselves. At local authority level within region, we have the so-called BAOSs, these are Officers for Reception, Guidance and Monitoring of Migrants. But perhaps I can tell a little bit more about these BAOSs, these special officers, because they play an essential role when it comes to the issue of missing migrants. In the Blesian Airport, we have a BAOS, one of these offices dealing specifically with migrants. And together with the IOM, we engage very often in voluntary repatriation schemes. So migrants returning are met at the airport, and officials from the BAOS meet with them, and for each migrant, a sort of data sheet is produced to provide psychological support, but also financial support to avoid migrants wanting to depart once again and embark on hazardous journeys. So very often the migrants that we're dealing with are in a situation of distress. So we're working together with psychosocial assistants who work within all the so-called BAOSs. So working together with repatriated migrants, we're trying to better understand the fate of migrants who may well have left with them, but who have been abandoned at sea. Either they died at sea, or at least they're missing, they've disappeared. So these offices, through these offices, we've been able to identify a certain number of people who are considered missing migrants. But these offices are not only involved in reception services, guidance, because in Senegal, to avoid young Senegalese departing on a hazardous journey towards Europe, we have decided that we need to concentrate on what's happening internally. In other words, conduct policies that will enable young people to stay in Senegal. And in order to do that, we have attempted to establish relations in the context of what we call circular migration. We're working together with Spain, circular migration. For circular migration, I think we're talking about seasonal activities, agricultural activities. We have an agreement with the Spanish authorities, enterprises in Spain that want to recruit young people. We can send them to work in Spanish companies, but on the basis of a nine-month contract only, and no longer, following which they return then to Senegal. So they are employed on a seasonal basis to work in the agricultural sector. Alongside that, the government is working on what we call border management, border surveillance strategy. Almost every day we see that there are boats attempting to leave Senegal, and we have been able to stop a certain number of these departures. So I think it illustrates the essential role being playing by the BAOSs in Senegal when it comes to migration, these offices for reception, guidance and monitoring of migrants. I think there are a number of concerns that can explain the policies that are being conducted in Senegal. I think one of our first concerns is the absence of any adequate data or sufficiently reliable data to enable us to gauge the phenomenon. And I think that's something that all countries share to a certain extent, an absence of reliable data. That is a real problem. Then a second, the concern. There is the potential to deal with the issues, but that potential isn't being exploited. The third problem is the weak nature of sub-regional and international schemes and mechanisms. Then we're seeing increasingly numerous irregular immigration flows that are increasing the risk of disappearances and deaths. And migrants are increasingly being exposed to the risk of human rights violations. So what we're trying to do there is work on databases at the level of our specialized offices. It's within the BAOSs that we try and collate information. If someone has lost a family member, after a certain period of time, a report has to be filed. If it hasn't been possible to contact a member of the family, we within the ministry can sort of activate sort of consular networks to try and find out whether the person in question might well have been detained somewhere, or whether that person is alive that has decided deliberately not to give news of his or her whereabouts, or whether we have no news whatsoever of the person concerned, at which point in time we can presume that that person is missing. So that work is based on our databases. We have quality human resources, investigators, forensic experts, so we can draw on a wide diplomatic and consular network, and we can draw on civil society. Though we're seeing there are problems in terms of inadequate funding. We very often receive funding from the ICRC or the IOM, enabling us to host two-day seminars, for example. That was the case together with the International Committee of the Red Cross that funded this workshop, this training workshop, the tune of some 90%. And the workshop was set up for coordinators working within the relative BAOSs or respective BAOSs, so that they can be trained on the issue of missing migrants. So I think our partners, the persons that we are working together with, are making efforts in the area of funding. But I think we're seeing mafia-like, well-structured organizations moving in. And we've seen a lot of losses in human life along hazardous migration routes, without the possibility of identifying those concerned and without the possibility of conducting any kind of investigation. Hence the need for specific measures and strategies so that we can fight this phenomenon more effectively. As I say, we can draw on human resources, but I think there is a notable lack of adequate mechanisms that would enable us to ensure better protection of the rights of migrants, in spite of the existence of a number of international and regional treaties in the area of human rights. And there is further problem in terms of the harmonization of national legislation with international conventions. I think all countries really need the courage to take a fresh look at their own national legislation when it comes to the fate of missing migrants. Essentially, I think we're talking about disappearance. We have rights that date back to colonial times, and there's an attempt to apply them to the fate of missing migrants today, but there are problems because there are various stages that have to be followed with a view to reporting someone as missing or possibly deceased. And as I was saying to my friend yesterday, where someone might be declared as missing, and the wife concerned remarries, but the person had been declared missing but then turns up. His wife had then remarried, which of course has created problems. So what are the rights of the sort of first husband as opposed to the new husband? Hence the need to have a fresh look at the laws that apply to persons or individuals in the light of regional trends. So I think what we need to do is harmonised action with a view to get a grip on the problem. I think what is needed is an intersectoral vision or an intersectoral approach to the phenomenon of missing migrants or deceased migrants. So I think we need an intersectoral approach. And I think we need to develop appropriate management tools, models, and methods to implement integrated policies and more operational activities. So what are our aims? We want to fill the gap in terms of data and information on migration. We want to increase the contribution made by various protagonists. And we want a better system for handling migrants who returning migrants. As I was saying earlier, we draw up a file on migrants who return so that they can be assisted and integrated within Senegalese society, so they're not tempted to leave once again, so they're involved in projects, but they're given assistance when they return. Fourthly, I think we need to step up efforts to tackle migrant smuggling and human trafficking, and to provide support structures for victims. So these are the points that I wanted to share with this August Assembly. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Diop. Very interesting, your presentation.